son of a...
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 action horror film, The Lair. A film that is directed by Neil Marshall and it stars Charlotte Kirk, who also co-wrote the film with Neil Marshall, Jonathan Howard, Jamie Bamber, Kibong Tanje, Leon Akenden and Mark Streppen. Right, this film focuses on Charlotte Kirk's character, Sinclair, who is shot down over Afghanistan. She's a pilot, a military pilot. She's shot down over Afghanistan. And in order to escape from the insurgents, she gets into an underground Russian bunker that has been abandoned for many, many decades. She manages to escape from there, but only just, as she is hunted down by some monstrous beasties, makes it to a nearby US military base. They are then hunted down by these creatures and beasties and have to kind of fight to stay alive. Right. What are my thoughts on The Lair? Well, where did this film come from? Neil Marshall. Now, if you don't know, Neil Marshall is the director that brought us such films as Dog Soldiers and The Descent. I think you will all agree, two fine additions to the horror genre. And he had a pretty good run back in those days. Like I say, he had Dog Soldiers, The Descent, then he did Doomsday, and then what was the other one that he did that did quite well? Either way, he had a pretty good run, like 4 films, one after each other, that did reasonably well. Centurion, that was the other one. And then he kind of fell off a little bit. We didn't see him for a few years. He was doing telly for a while, some TV episodes here and there. He's done Game of Thrones and things like that. And then he came back in 2019 with Hellboy, and we know how well that went. But he's been kind of, making strides, I think, in these last 2 or 3 years, trying to get back into the horror genre. And I didn't know this film existed or was coming out or anything. I knew this film had been released, and then when I looked it up as to who was in it and who was directing it and stuff like that, I was pleasantly surprised to see Neil Marshall directing this. So I was immediately interested. Is this film anything like his early work? No. It can't be compared to it. I think he's almost trying too hard with this film, certainly, to recapture old glory, certainly the Dog Soldiers type stuff. While I don't think this film is what you would describe as bad, it is definitely flawed. And again, I think some of the things that worked in Dog Soldiers, like the camaraderie between the soldiers and the back and forth and stuff, the attempts to recreate that in this film fall massively flat. And that's for a few reasons. Number one, the dialogue's terrible. And number two, the characters here are nowhere near as memorable as the characters in films like Dog Soldiers at all. They're just not even close. In actual fact, they're absolute cliches. Now, I think Charlotte Kirk does a good job here with the material that she's got, which isn't great material. But she kind of is the lead actress here, and she does a fairly good job of carrying this film and doing a good job, along with Jonathan Howard. The pair of them are kind of co-leads, I suppose you could say, to a large degree. And they're okay. And then we've got others and stuff. Like I say, none of them are particularly memorable. There's a character called Jones, which is like a Welsh sergeant, I think he is, who's got a few one-liners here and there, but again, nothing like stuff that we've seen before. I think it was trying too hard to recapture some of that. And then we come to Jamie Bamber. Now, I like Jamie Bamber. I mean, I've got fond memories of him, obviously, in Battlestar Galactica. And for those of you who don't know, Jamie Bamber is as English can be. He's got a very strong English accent. He is not American, which surprised me, because when I saw him in Battlestar Galactica, I didn't know for years it was English, because he had a flawless American accent in that program. Well, the American accent he chooses to go with here in this film is awful. and they give him this horrible eye patch. I don't know why they gave him this eye patch. And they give him, he has his terrible accent, and it comes across as seriously bad, his character, with some really bad dialogue as well. So yeah, there's characters in this thing that just don't work. They're very cliched. And it's pretty generic stuff. These creatures, you know, it's exactly what you expect it to be. Underground, abandoned Russian experimental site, beasties and creatures, hunting down military types. It's exactly what you imagine in your head it to be like. At times it's fun. At times it drags a bit. And when you've seen one of these beasties, you've seen them all. And they do show them a little bit too much, I think. And at times I think they look pretty good. And at other times it just looks like a man in a suit, for me. So I thought he overused these creatures a bit, Neil Marshall, in the film. So they kind of lost that fear factor a little bit. And they also didn't follow their own rules a little bit, because at times these creatures were almost impossible to kill. And then at other times, you know, they were killing them like that. So it kind of, it felt unbalanced. And it raised far too many questions for me. If it rises up in this film that, you know, this place has been, the people have been looking for this bunker for decades. And then when it's finally located, what do they choose to do with it? Bomb it. For some reason. And why would the Russians suddenly abandon this site? It doesn't really explain that, with all this valuable research down there and these beasties that they've created. I mean, you know, and I think it's fairly safe to say that Russians are going to be the big bad guys again for the next decade or so in movies. Forget, you know, Middle East now that it's been for the last 20 years. It's going to be Russians going forward again, isn't it? It's going to be like watching the 80s movies all over again. So yeah, it raises far too many questions, and it's got the silliest grenade scene I've ever seen in my life. There's a character that pops a grenade and sacrifices himself to kill one of these creatures. And it was just like, it kind of made me laugh a little bit, you know, because that's just not how grenades react. Certainly when it touches your body anyway. So yeah, it's a bit silly at times, this film. It does get a little bit silly. It's a bit cliched. But I think the action's fine, and there are glimpses of the Neil Marshall of old, but it's only glimpses, I would say. But it's entertaining. If you like a good military-based creature feature, there's some entertainment to be had here. You know, throwing the popcorn down your face, having a few drinks with your mates. You can watch far worse than this, but it's only slightly above like B-movie level, this, and I mean only slightly. But hopefully he can recapture his old form eventually, Neil Marshall. But this unfortunately misses the mark. But I don't think it's terribly bad or anything like that, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I will, of course, be back with loads more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.